Our next guest is an English television presenter, well known for his cooking, his world exploration, and yes, of course, putting cars through the most gruelling and sometimes bizarre tests. Currently, he's preparing for a trip down under and a live theatre show. We are, of course, talking about James May. James, welcome to News Breakfast.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. I'm impressed that you think I'm renowned for cooking.
Well, we just wanted to add that in. I mean, you've got so many different strings to your bow. I suspect in Australia you're probably best known for squabbling with Jeremy Clarkson on Top Gear. We might get to that in a moment, but you're here to talk about explorers. Why did you want to do a live theatre show about explorers?
Well, to be honest, I've made several TV shows about exploration in its broadest sense. I mean, literally explorers and things like the space race. And I was invited to, and I thought, do you know what? I was thinking I was approaching retirement, but this is an interesting new tangent. It's live performance, which is very different from doing TV. I've done a bit of it before, but not generally on my own. It's stimulating. It's about time I came to Australia again, to be honest. So,
well, we're happy to have you coming down here.
Thank you.
According to your publicity team, at least, you're going to cover everything from the Ice Age to the Space Age. That seems like an ambitious undertaking for one evening.
Yes, it's a very good point, because as we start working on the script now, we realise it is, in fact, an enormous subject. It's far too big for one evening. We might have to have Explorers 2 and Explorers 3 or 4, to become a franchise, a bit like Mission Impossible. Yes, it's a bit of a gallop, and we can't tell the whole story because, I mean, really, exploration is the whole history of humankind, because it starts with the earliest migrations of the human species in, far back into prehistory, and it goes through the ice ages and so on. And every movement of people, every discovery, by the Europeans of, say, Australia, or the Polynesians, who almost certainly found North America, the Vikings and so on, they all change our view of the world, and with it, I suppose, our view of ourselves. I don't want to sound too pretentious about it, but it's at the core of everything we've ever done, seeing what's over the next hill. And this process starts for all of us as children when we first, set off on our bicycles to the next town or around the next corner. I think it was Michael Collins of the Apollo 11 crew. He said to explore is, he said it was an imperative. Right.
What's the most interesting thing you've learned putting together this show?
Well, I think, no end of things, and I'm still learning. I'm quite impressed with Pythias the Greek, who I didn't really know anything about. Okay. So we're talking here about sort of 500 BC, a good half a millennia before Caesar, Julius Caesar, that is, and he travelled to the Arctic Circle. Not an awful idea in the modern times, let alone then. And he set off from what today is basically the south of France, Marseille. And he was also the first literate person to visit Britain and make records of Britain and the British Isles. And I think he was the first person to use the word Britain to describe the place, from which we ended up with Great Britain and Little Britain, which became Brittany, and so on and so on. So that's 2,500 years ago, and I didn't really know that story. I didn't really know how a Greek ended up in Marseille, really, but,
There you go. Just on the Arctic Circle, I seem to remember you driving maybe a Toyota Hilux through the snow for a very long period of time. I'm not sure if that's where you were headed. You were headed in that general direction, I think. Can I ask about Top Gear and the Grand Tour? I feel like you must get asked a lot about that. Do you find it annoying?
No, not really. I'm always braced and ready for it, to be honest, because I know people are going to ask me about it. I did spend, over 20 years of my life, a third of my existence, working with those two idiots, so I have to answer for it.
Yeah. Well, there was a lovely YouTube compilation I found last night of you bickering with Jeremy, made for great TV. Then went into some highlights. I went down quite a rabbit hole. You can see we've got different highlights of you on the screen now. How did you feel when you wrapped everything up with Jeremy and Richard? Because I think I'm right in saying your production company's now all being dissolved, and you've officially kind of drawn a line under things.
Yes, we have disbanded. and there isn't going to be a reunion. So we're not, we're not like Led Zeppelin or anything like that. Well, in very many ways, we're not like Led Zeppelin. Well, it was emotional, I suppose. I was in that job longer than I've been in any other job, by a long, long way. Most other jobs I managed a few years in before I was fired for one reason or another. And it was longer than I spent at school. So whether I like it or not, those other two are a very significant part of my life. So I suppose it was, it's a cliche to say end of an era and all that stuff, but it was. I also think, though, it was probably time for us to stop, because we always said we would land it with dignity, not fly it into the cliffs. That's the way we used to talk about it. We have come close to flying it into the cliffs a few times. So it was probably the right time to stop. We're getting on a bit. Our view of the subject is probably becoming a bit dated. It's time for a younger generation to reevaluate it and think of a new way of talking about things like cars and transport generally. I don't know how they're going to do it exactly, but I feel sure there must be somebody out there.
Someone will do it. Yeah, Jeremy seems to be off farming. That seems to be his focus now. Just finally, back to what we're meant to be talking about. When are you coming to Australia?
I arrive, right, I have my itinerary here and I have to consult it, otherwise I get it wrong. 29th of July, it starts in Perth, then it moves on to Adelaide, Canberra, Melbourne, Brisbane, and so on, with possibly 2 dates in Sydney, going over to New Zealand as well, and then after that on to Singapore. So it's almost a month of gruesomely hard work.
That is quite a tour. Everyone's got Google. They can check it out for themselves at home. James May, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
No, pleasure. Thank you for having me.